Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We said at the beginning of the transfer portal window opening up that Brent Venables was going to make moves to make the line of scrimmage play better for the Oklahoma Sooners heading into 2024. And boy, did he get that done with former TCU defensive lineman Damonic Williams. Want to dive into the film of Damonic Williams and really talk about what he brings to this Oklahoma defense. Until you read Twitter, you read the message boards, all of a sudden the Missouri fans, the LSU fans, the Texas fans, they're saying, hey, Damonic Williams, what, he only have 2.5 sacks last year? He was just going to be a depth piece for us heading into 2024. You turn on the film, Damonic Williams and the value he brings to a defense goes way beyond the box score and the stat line for Damonic Williams. He's a guy that you look at what he brings, eating up double teams, being able to let your linebackers play clean, play downhill. Dill, I went back to the 2022 year for TCU when Damonic Williams was a true freshman. You talk about linebackers benefiting from Damonic Williams. Johnny Hodges, 87 tackles, 9.5 tackles for a loss. Jamoy Hodge, 82 tackles, 7 tackles for a loss. D. Winters, 79 tackles, 14.5 tackles for a loss. This TCU linebacker room in 2022, it was a good linebacker room. They got a lot of praise. Not enough praise went to Damonic Williams and what he did from that nose tackle spot during that 2022 year. You look at who's going to benefit from Damonic Williams coming into Norman. Danny Stutzman is going to have an absolute field day in 2024. Want to dive into the film, talk about what Damonic Williams brings to this Oklahoma defense before we get into. And as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, the Oklahoma fans, whether we're talking the recruiting trail, the transfer portal, the amount of support y'all continue to show to the boys truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, I'm going to give you the T-box because you have been a Damonic Williams guy for the last 2 years since we saw him as a true freshman. I'll give you the T-box here with what Damonic Williams brings to Oklahoma.
And you kind of said it. I mean, when teams think like, oh, they're going to play a 3-man front, we can run on this team. When you have guys who can just eat blocks up the way Damonic Williams and some of his teammates have at TCU for a while, you see when you have good linebacker play, you can have a really good defense. And again, when TCU had good linebacker play in 2022, I think you saw Damonic Williams' impact more. They obviously just didn't have the same team defense last year, but he was still doing his thing. You still see what he has. And when you think about what Danny Stutzman can do and how Venables coaches his linebackers to play downhill and aggressive, you kind of need a guy like Damonic Williams or maybe a DeJohn Terry, those type of guys to facilitate that style.
And you look at DeJohn Terry and Damonic Williams, I think DeJohn Terry is another guy that probably just didn't get enough credit for what he did for Oklahoma in 2023. You go back and watch some Oklahoma, he was a force in the middle of that defensive line. Furthermore, you look at Oklahoma when they are thriving on defense, it's when there's some of the better defenses in the country in terms of producing tackles for a loss, negative plays. Damonic Williams might not be the one getting credit for the tackle for a loss on the stat sheet, but when you watch the film, Damonic Williams plays a massive part in creating some of these negative plays. You look at here against Texas in 2022, one of the better offensive lines you saw in the country. I mean, Damonic Williams just being able to stand up double teams. Again, this stuff is not going to make the highlight reel, but you look at these linebackers being able to get downhill because Damonic Williams is eating up that double team, not letting the guards get to the linebacker position. I mean, that is how this Oklahoma defense is going to thrive with Damonic Williams in the middle of this defense.
And that's what you see how good Stutzman was at shooting gaps and getting into the backfield. And you see when there's no movement off the line of scrimmage, how much better a guy like Jamoy Hodge on that play can see it and react quickly and explode through and make big plays. And again, when you get those type plays where it's 2-3 yard losses, I mean, those are like drive changers.
Those are game changers. And you look at how this Oklahoma defense is constructed. I mean, like, we want to get in 3rd and long situations. We want to let our Mason Thomas, big PJ, we want to see them getting after the passer. And if this Oklahoma defense can live in those 3rd and long situations, that's really when Brent Venables is at his best as a defensive minded.
Like when Clemson was at the height of their powers, it was Christian Wilkins, those type of guys, just Dexter Lawrence dominating football games, creating negative plays and taking the ball. I mean, it was just all kind of fed into being one of those stifling defense, not a bend but don't break defense, but one of those like we're just turning the heat up.
And you take a look at another asset that I really like for Damonic Williams is his ability to allow a defense to be a little bit creative in terms of how they are going to try to really stop opposing offenses. Like, you can have light boxes when you have Damonic Williams on the inside of that defensive line. You see TCU here on a 1st and 10, really, I mean, a 5-man, maybe 6-man box here. Why can they do that and have success? One, because Colorado struggled to run the football. There's no lie about that. But number two, and look at Damonic Williams from that nose tackle spot. I mean, putting the center 2 yards into the backfield, allowing his linebackers to come up and make plays. When you have a guy that can be a presence like that in the middle of your defensive line, you can play with light boxes and be just fine stopping the run. And that really, when you look at modern day college football, that's the goal. Light boxes that we can have our athleticism to stop what you're trying to do in the passing attack, but also be able to stop the run. Another thing that I like, and Dill, you sent me this. I mean, Damonic Williams' ability when he's not getting double teamed to get off blocks, use his hands. I mean, that is something that kind of, in my opinion, separates solid guys on the inside of the defensive line to really game record guy, great guys on the inside of the defensive line. You look at him right here against Michigan, working against really one of the better centers in the country in Olu. I mean, he's going to get it just a one-on-one opportunity with Olu. I'm going to shed his hands, and I'm going to go make a play. Damonic Williams can impact the run game in a variety of different ways here.
And I agree. I think that's something like you want to see that type of like production on the tackle side a little bit, where Damonic Williams has made a fair amount of tackles, been involved in that. Because, again, you want to be able to essentially force double teams. And if you're not going to double him, he's going to make you pay for it. And that, to me, you're right. It is the sign of really good defensive tackles. Because if you wanted to just cut guys or do something to like eat double teams, I suppose you can do it. But then teams don't need to double team you. And you're Damonic Williams, you're explosive, you're athletic enough to shed blocks and 2-gap and do some of those like next level things as a defensive tackle. I'm kind of with you. I think that takes your game and your ability to impact a football game to a new level.
So how about what he can do as a pass rusher too, which I think excites you because he's probably not going to play a ton of nose for Oklahoma in 2024. He's going to have a little bit more opportunity to be involved as a pass rusher. They're lining him up at the 5 tech, going up against Kelvin Banks at the bottom of your screen right here. Even the Oklahoma fans will give Kelvin Banks his credit. He's probably going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft come 2025. This is true freshman on true freshman right here. And you look at Damonic. Actually, I take that back. This is from 2023, so they're both sophomores going at it. Damonic Williams, the power in his hands when he has opportunities to get involved in the pass rush, special stuff. I mean, Kelvin Banks, again, one of the better tackles in college football, completely, I mean, just kind of going to work on one of the better tackles. And then you look at what he can do from the inside too. You make no mistake about it. He can impact as a pass rusher from the inside as well. And again, does it necessarily result in sacks? Probably not, but he's a guy that is extremely disruptive. He's breaking up a lot of pockets. He's a pocket destroyer, right? You look at what the idea is for the offensive line of pass protection to create that pocket for that quarterback. Damonic Williams, not a guy that you can really have pockets with. You look at him working through a double team here. The power in his hands, I mean, you're pretty much forklifting this guard right here, put him in the dirt, allowing the rest of the TCU defensive line to rally, get off the field on 3rd down. I mean, again, that stuff is not necessarily put in the box score, but it's all what Damonic Williams brings to the table for this Oklahoma defense.
And I'm really interested to see how he rushes the passer in a scheme like where Venables and Oklahoma are going to run, where you're going to see a little bit more of that 4-man front and allow him better matchups, frankly, because you're right. It's really, really hard to rush from that 3-man front, especially as the nose guard. So didn't get a ton of opportunities, but you see the explosiveness, you see the athleticism, has a good sense of when he can run through guys, when he's going to make a move. I think he might be able to like amp his production up, have a little bit better box score, just because, again, I think Venables does want his defensive lineman to eat. You've seen so many guys go high in the draft from that interior spot because Venables does give them opportunities, wants them to be really, really effective. And I think Damonic Williams is going to benefit.
100% agree that his production is going to go much, much better heading into 2024. He's just going to have a lot more opportunity. And you start looking at this Oklahoma defensive line. I mean, we talked about Jermaine Lalea coming to Oklahoma as well. He's a guy that at Arizona State was one of the better interior defensive linemen, not only in the Pac-12, but in the country. You look at this Oklahoma defensive line, Dejon Terry, Damonic Williams. Talk about trying to run the football. I don't care in the Big 12 or in the SEC. That is going to be a hard duo to run the football against. But then you start talking about kind of the depth to this defensive line. Grayson Halton, guy like Devon Sears, Ashton Sanders. Talk about David Stone, Jaden Jackson. I mean, on the inside of that defensive line, they got 7 or 8 names that they have a lot of confidence in heading into 2024. You look at what made –
and also guys you might be able to do a little bit of different things with. You think of Grayson Halton and Ashton Sanders. Like, they're not the same players as DeJoun Terry and maybe a Dominic Williams are, who are much bigger, more physical. I mean, you got Halton and Sanders, who I think can be a little bit more penetrators. So, again, you can kind of run your defense, maybe customize it to the team, customize it to the situation. I just think you have a lot more versatility than you would have if you add Dominic Williams. I mean, you still have DeJoun Terry, who's big, physical, heavy guy. But I think you're kind of look around like who is going to be the running mate, who is going to be able to provide depth at that type of role. And now you have a guy who kind of headlines it, frankly.
Yeah, and you talk about like what you want the recipe to look like for Oklahoma in 2024. It all comes from, hey, we're going to win on first and second down, stopping the run, and we're going to get – and it might not even be Dominic Williams on third down. It might be a guy like Ashton Sanders or Grayson Hall or David Stone. We're going to put our pass rushers on the field when we get you in those certain long situations, and we're going to get after you. Zach Alley comes in. Those safeties are going to get involved in some of those throwing windows. I'm fired up for what this is.
Even you look at the edge room, I mean, you can kick guys like Trace Ford or Ethan Downs and rush from the inside, and you obviously have your Thomas and PJ, guys who are really look like they're becoming elite on the edge. And you just kind of have a really well-rounded defensive line. I think Venables and Alley can do a lot with it, and that's kind of what you're excited for, because I think there have been times where Oklahoma last year, maybe you could argue they didn't have that premier edge rush play because PJ hadn't quite developed into that guy yet. Looking at the spring game, he definitely seems like he might be that guy. So, again, I think you just have a little bit more diverse set of skills in this defensive line than you probably did last year. And I think that'll bode well for what Venables wants to do.
Brent Venables is going to cook with this front seven. Like, so many different bodies and skill sets. I don't trust anyone else to kind of maximize those guys than Brent Venables. I'm fired up. I think this was a massive addition. Talk about going to the SEC line of scrimmage play. It's in a good spot for Oklahoma. We'll cut it there. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.